Imagine this. You wake up one day and realize that the person holding you back is you. Not the world, not your past, not even the people who doubted you. It's that hidden part of yourself, your dark side, the part you don't want to admit exists. Now, what if I told you that this part of you isn't just something to fear, but the key to your growth, strength, and even wisdom? Jordan Peterson, a modern-day psychologist and thinker, often talks about this idea, building on Carl Jung's concept of the shadow, the hidden, often repressed side of our personality. According to them, if you don't confront your dark side, it will control you in ways you don't even realize. So today, we're going to explore what Carl Jung's shadow really is, why Jordan Peterson believes confronting it is essential for a meaningful life, how suppressing your dark side can lead to weakness and resentment, and most importantly, how you can integrate your shadow and unlock your full potential. This isn't just philosophy. This is about your life, about becoming the person you're truly capable of being. So stick with me, because by the end of this video, you might just see yourself differently. Picture this. You're walking through life, playing the role of a good person. You try to be kind, agreeable, and avoid conflict. You want to see yourself as honest, patient, maybe even selfless. But deep down, there are other parts of you, the parts you don't want to admit exist. The part that gets jealous when your friend succeeds. The part that feels rage but swallows it because good people don't get angry. The part that secretly enjoys power, manipulation, or even the thought of revenge. The part that wants to dominate, control, or prove others wrong. These aren't just random feelings. They are part of you. And if you refuse to acknowledge them, they don't go away. Instead, they form what Carl Jung called the shadow, the hidden unconscious part of your personality that contains everything you've rejected or suppressed about yourself. Let's break it down. 1. The shadow is your repressed self. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, believed that the shadow develops in childhood. From a young age, we learn that some behaviors are acceptable while others are not. If you get angry as a child, your parents might tell you, "Don't be so aggressive." So you learn to push that side of yourself down. If you cry, maybe you hear, "Toughen up." So you start hiding your emotions. If you express a big ambition, people might mock you. So you tone yourself down to fit in. Over time, these parts of you don't just disappear, they get buried in the unconscious mind. And this creates the shadow self, a collection of all the parts of yourself that you've ignored, denied, or been told are bad. But here's the thing, just because you suppress something doesn't mean it stops affecting you. 2. The shadow controls you if you ignore it. Most people think that hiding their dark side makes them better, but Jung warned that the more you suppress your shadow, the more power it has over you. If you never admit you feel angry, you might one day explode in uncontrollable rage. If you never acknowledge your selfishness, you might manipulate people without realizing it. If you refuse to admit you have a need for power, you might project it onto others, accusing them of being controlling while being blind to your own behavior. This is why people who see themselves as completely good are often the most dangerous. They lack self-awareness. They don't realize that their own shadow is acting through them, influencing their choices and creating blind spots. And history shows this over and over. The most violent revolutions often start with people who think they are righteous and can do no wrong. Corrupt leaders often begin as idealists who never face their own thirst for power. Even in daily life, the people who claim to be the most pure or holy often have hidden darkness they refuse to acknowledge. The lesson? Your shadow doesn't go away just because you ignore it. It simply works behind the scenes, influencing you in ways you don't understand. 3. The shadow holds your greatest potential. But here's the twist. The shadow isn't just darkness. It also contains your hidden strengths. Think about it. Maybe you were told as a child that being bold was rude, so you became shy. But now, your shadow holds the confidence you need to step up in life. Maybe you were taught to always follow the rules, so you suppressed your ability to think independently. But now, your shadow holds the courage to break out of limiting beliefs. Maybe you hid your anger because you were told it was bad. But now, that anger could be a source of power, to stand up for yourself, protect your loved ones, and set strong boundaries. Jung believed that facing your shadow isn't just about controlling darkness, it's about unlocking your full potential. Because within the parts of yourself that you fear are the parts that will set you free. The first step, awareness. Most people are completely unaware of their shadow. They think, I'm not the problem, it's everyone else. But Jung argued that self-awareness is the key to personal growth. To break free from the unconscious grip of your shadow, you first need to recognize it. Ask yourself, what qualities do I dislike most in others? Often, these are the exact traits we've suppressed in ourselves. Pay attention to your emotional reactions, especially strong ones. If someone triggers you, it might be because they reflect a part of you that you haven't accepted. Notice patterns in your life. Are you always the victim, the people pleaser, the underdog? These roles might be how your shadow manifests. Bringing your shadow to light is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit things about yourself that you don't want to see. But the reward is worth it, because once you confront your shadow, it no longer controls you. Instead, it becomes your ally, a source of strength, wisdom, and untapped power. And that's where the real transformation begins. So we know the shadow exists. It's the part of ourselves that we don't want to admit to. But why does Jordan Peterson insist that we must confront it? After all, wouldn't it just be easier to ignore it? To stay nice, agreeable, and keep up the image of a good person? Peterson argues that avoiding your dark side doesn't make you good. It makes you weak, fragile, and easily manipulated. And here's why. 1. If you don't confront your dark side, it controls you. One of Peterson's most famous ideas is that people who never acknowledge their capacity for evil are the ones most likely to do harm. Why? Because if you don't recognize that you're capable of cruelty, manipulation, or destruction, you'll project those qualities onto other people and see yourself as a helpless victim. You'll assume that all evil is out there and that you're purely good. This makes you dangerously blind to your own faults. You won't develop the inner strength to resist when you're pressured or tempted into harmful behavior. History has shown this over and over again. Peterson often talks about Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, and other totalitarian regimes. Most of the people who committed horrific acts weren't monsters at first. They were normal people who had never confronted their own potential for evil. So when the time came to choose between courage or conformity, morality or obedience, strength or submission, they failed. Because they had never explored their own darkness, they became tools for something far worse. 2. Strength comes from knowing you are dangerous. Peterson has a phrase that often shocks people. A weak man is not a good man. At first, this might sound harsh. Shouldn't goodness mean being harmless, peaceful, and avoiding conflict? Not according to Peterson. He argues that true goodness requires the ability to be dangerous. Because if you have no strength, no ability to push back, no power, then your goodness isn't really a choice. It's just a lack of options. A truly good person isn't weak. They are capable of being dangerous, but choose not to be. This is what Jung called integrating the shadow. It means acknowledging that you have the capacity for cruelty, selfishness, and aggression, but developing the strength to control it and use it wisely. Think about it like this. A person who is too nice to ever say no will be walked all over. A person who never stands up for themselves will eventually become resentful and bitter. A person who suppresses all their anger will eventually explode in unpredictable ways. The goal is not to be harmless. The goal is to be powerful but disciplined. That's why Peterson tells people, you should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it. 3. Facing the shadow gives you purpose and meaning. Peterson often connects this idea to meaning and responsibility. Many people today feel lost, weak, or directionless because they don't take responsibility for their own strength. They think, I'm just unlucky. The world is unfair. Other people are the problem. But Peterson's challenge is, what if you are the problem? What if you have untapped strength that you refuse to develop? What if your feelings of weakness or anxiety come from avoiding the hard truths about yourself? What if the darkest parts of you, your anger, your resentment, your fears, are actually the key to unlocking your full potential? The shadow isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to be mastered. The challenge? Are you willing to face yourself? Peterson's message isn't comfortable. He's not telling people, you're perfect the way you are. Instead, he's saying, you are far more dangerous, flawed, and capable of destruction than you realize. But if you face that honestly and take responsibility, you can become something truly powerful. And that's the challenge. Are you willing to look in the mirror and see the parts of yourself that you don't like? Are you willing to take ownership of your own weakness so that you can turn it into strength? Are you willing to confront the most difficult parts of yourself so that no one else can use them against you? Because the truth is, if you don't integrate your shadow, someone else will. Your suppressed anger, your ignored potential, your hidden insecurities, they don't disappear. They either control you or you learn to control them. So the real question is, are you ready to do the work? Next, we'll explore exactly what happens when you ignore your shadow. 1. You project your darkness onto others. Ever met someone who always thinks everyone else is the problem? The person who constantly calls others arrogant, but can't see their own ego. The friend who accuses everyone of being fake, but hides their own true self. The coworker who sees every little disagreement as an attack because they refuse to admit they struggle with control. This is called projection, and it's one of the biggest dangers of ignoring your shadow. When we suppress parts of ourselves, we often see those traits in others instead. If you never admit to your own manipulative tendencies, you'll assume everyone else is trying to manipulate you. If you deny your own aggressive instincts, you'll constantly feel like others are being hostile toward you. If you ignore your own selfishness, you'll become obsessed with calling out selfishness in others. In other words, the things we hate most in others often reflect what we've rejected in ourselves. This is why self-awareness is so important. The more you integrate your shadow, the less power it has over your perception of the world. Instead of living in a state of constant blame, you start to take responsibility for your own reactions. 2. Repressed emotions eventually explode. Imagine trying to hold a beach ball underwater. At first, it seems like you're in control, but the longer you push it down, the more pressure builds, until suddenly, it shoots up and smacks you in the face. That's exactly how repressed emotions work. If you ignore your anger, one day you'll explode over something small, leaving people confused by your overreaction. If you suppress your sadness, it might turn into depression without you realizing why. If you bury your need for independence, it might come out as passive aggressiveness or sudden impulsive decisions. Repressed emotions don't stay hidden forever. They find ways to surface, sometimes in ways that hurt you and those around you. This is why Jung believed that integrating your shadow prevents destructive behavior. When you acknowledge your darker emotions before they take control, you gain power over them, rather than letting them control you. 3. You stay stuck in repeating patterns. Ever noticed how some people keep making the same mistakes over and over? They keep attracting toxic relationships. They keep sabotaging their own success. They keep falling into the same emotional traps. Why? Because their shadow is running the show. If someone refuses to face their fear of failure, they might unconsciously sabotage opportunities to avoid the possibility of failing. If someone denies their need for love, they might push people away while blaming others for not caring. If someone hides their aggressive instincts, they might become overly passive, until one day they snap and damage their relationships. When you ignore your shadow, you remain unconscious of the forces driving your behavior. And until you confront them, you'll keep repeating the same cycles, without ever understanding why. 4. You limit your own potential. One of the biggest dangers of ignoring your shadow is that you never fully become who you're meant to be. Carl Jung believed that true growth happens when we integrate all parts of ourselves, not just the ones we like. Think of the hero's journey in mythology. The hero starts in their comfort zone. They face a challenge that forces them to confront their weaknesses. Through struggle and self-discovery, they emerge stronger, wiser, and more powerful. But what happens if the hero refuses to face their darkness? They stay weak. They avoid challenges. They never grow. By ignoring your shadow, you limit your ability to evolve into a stronger, more complete version of yourself. Facing your darkness isn't about becoming cruel, reckless, or selfish. It's about owning all parts of yourself so you can use them consciously, rather than letting them control you from the shadows. 5. You live in fear of yourself. Perhaps the most tragic consequence of ignoring your shadow is that you never truly know yourself. If you're constantly running from your own thoughts, emotions, and impulses, how can you ever feel at peace? You'll always feel a little uneasy, as if something inside you is waiting to burst. You'll be afraid to explore certain ideas or emotions, fearing what you might find. You'll resist deep connections with others because they might see the parts of you that you're trying to hide. True freedom comes from self-acceptance. When you confront your shadow, you stop living in fear of yourself. You become more resilient, self-aware, and confident, because you know exactly who you are and what you're capable of. Let's break it down into 3 clear steps that you can actually apply in your life. Step 1. Acknowledge your dark thoughts without judgment. The first step in integrating your shadow is to stop pretending that your dark side doesn't exist. This means becoming aware of the thoughts, emotions, and impulses that you usually suppress. Let's be honest. There are parts of yourself that you don't want to admit to. Maybe you feel anger toward people but suppress it to appear nice. Jealousy but pretend you're above it. Arrogance but hide it under fake humility. Resentment toward others but tell yourself you're too good to feel that way. Most people push these feelings down because they've been taught that these emotions are bad or wrong. But Jung's message is clear. What you resist not only persists, but grows stronger. That means if you keep ignoring your anger, jealousy, or aggression, it doesn't disappear. It just moves to your unconscious mind, where it can secretly influence your actions. So instead of fearing or denying these parts of yourself, the key is to observe them without judgment. How to apply this? The next time you feel anger, jealousy, or selfishness, don't push it away. Instead, sit with the feeling and ask, what is this trying to tell me? Write it down in a journal and explore where it comes from. This process is uncomfortable at first, but self-awareness is the first step towards self-mastery. Step 2. Find a healthy way to express your power. Once you acknowledge your shadow, the next step is to channel it in a way that makes you stronger, not weaker. Jordan Peterson often talks about how modern society encourages people to be harmless and agreeable, but he argues that true goodness isn't passivity, it's controlled strength. A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. What does this mean? It means that if you never learn to express your strength, you will either explode with repressed emotions at the worst times, or live in quiet resentment, always feeling like a victim. So instead of suppressing your power, you need to channel it into something constructive. How to apply this? Learn assertiveness. Start saying no when necessary, instead of always being nice. Develop physical strength. Whether it's working out, martial arts, or sports, physical discipline teaches mental discipline. Pursue something challenging. Facing difficult goals, like starting a business, improving a skill, or taking responsibility for a leadership role, forces you to embrace your inner strength. The goal is to own your power so that you can use it wisely, rather than letting it build up and explode in harmful ways. Step 3. Be willing to face discomfort. This might be the hardest step, but it's the most important. Integrating your shadow means facing parts of yourself that you don't like. Most people avoid this because it's painful to admit things like, you have a deep need for validation. You are capable of being selfish or manipulative. You sometimes feel hatred or resentment toward others. But here's the truth. The more honest you are about your flaws, the less control they have over you. Jung believed that true self-awareness comes from seeing yourself fully, not just the good parts, but the dark parts too. If you don't do this, you end up projecting your shadow onto others, blaming other people for things that you haven't resolved in yourself. Ever noticed how some people are hypercritical of others, calling them selfish, arrogant, or manipulative, but can't see those same qualities in themselves? That's shadow projection. And the only way to stop it is to own your darkness, instead of blaming it on the world. How to apply this? Spend 5 to 10 minutes a day in honest self-reflection. Ask, what am I avoiding about myself? When someone triggers anger or resentment in you, instead of blaming them, ask, what does this say about me? Be brutally honest with yourself, but without shame. This isn't about self-hatred, it's about self-understanding. So, what's the lesson here? The world tells you to be nice, agreeable, and harmless. But if you truly want to be strong, independent, and capable of handling life, you need to integrate your dark side. This doesn't mean becoming evil, it means becoming whole, owning both your light and your darkness so that nothing inside of you controls you unconsciously. Jordan Peterson and Carl Jung weren't just talking about psychology, they were giving us a blueprint for real strength. So ask yourself, what parts of yourself have you been avoiding? Where have you been too passive in life? Are you truly in control of your emotions, or do they control you? Because at the end of the day, facing your dark side isn't about becoming dangerous. It's about becoming someone truly powerful. And that's the real path to a meaningful life. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more insights on psychology and personal growth. See you in the next video.